If you are someone who is repeatedly going into psychedelic experiences and you are uncovering these deep parts of yourself and you're having these huge revelations, it might be the case that you unconsciously fell into a trap. Into a trap that's very common in the psychedelic space. And I want to talk about this trap today and what we can do to prevent that trap and overcome that trap. Alright, ready for that? So, hey, my name is Vergo. I'm a psychedelic integration coach. And what I love to talk about in this video is that how going too deep into psychedelic space can actually hold our development back. And what we can actually do to fix that. So, what I see in the psychedelic space, and it happened to me as well, I think it happens for so many people, is that people go into psychedelic space and they see that they can heal. There's shadow material that can emerge in psychedelic space. We can uncover parts of ourselves that we haven't been aware of before. And that process is very beautiful, because that's what it's about. The whole psychedelic odyssey is about uncovering these parts of ourselves that we haven't come to love yet. And our job is to love them. But for some, that process can be a little bit overwhelming. Or it can become somewhat like an endless circle of uncovering more and more parts before we're actually integrating them. And on the flip side of this is the collecting of insights. Because as we journey deeper and deeper into consciousness, we might discover certain parts of reality that we're amazed by. We're like, wow, I didn't know consciousness could do that. I didn't know and understand this about reality or that about reality. And then we're getting into this loop of chasing insights. We are collecting insights like trophies that are sitting on our shelf. And we're like, I understand what God is, I understand what consciousness is, I know who I am on the deepest layers of consciousness, I've got my spirit guides, I know everything about, plant mechanisms, whatever else, and we're just collecting these insights, more and more insights, like trophies. It's almost like the psychedelic materialism of just collecting more and more insights. And both of these facets of going deeper into psychedelic space have harsh consequences. Because for some, it can almost become this endless processing circle of thinking that I just need to process one more thing until I can actually take action in the real world. I might just want to uncover everything first until I am fully healed. Right? I gotta work through all the shadow material that's coming up in psychedelic space through more psychedelic journeys until I can take action. Right? I just get to know myself a little bit more. I need to get to know the deeper layers of consciousness a little bit more before I can, get a real job. But that has serious consequences because another ceremony is costing quite a bit of money. Like if you go into ayahuasca spaces, it's not quite cheap, and if you go in again and again, what I see many people come out with is too much conceptual understanding but too little embodiment. Like almost like an overwhelm from all the parts that they've uncovered. An overwhelm of all the insights that are now sitting on this shelf. People come out and they are almost too open, too expansive, which then leads them to confusion of not knowing what to do with all of that stuff that they have acquired from more and more psychedelic experiences. So, if that's you, you're not alone in that. Like I've gone through that process myself, and I have been thinking that I just need more insight to fix everything. So, as an example, I went to a 14-day ayahuasca retreat a couple of years ago, and I wanted to go as deep as possible with ayahuasca. I'm like, I'm here to go as deep as possible. And so I told the shaman, like, I want more. I want a little bit of a higher dose each day, like a little bit of a higher dose. And he's like, tranquilo, amigo, like, go slowly. Like, there's no rush here in this whole process of what is unfolding. And I was like, no, I want to go deeper, faster. And I want to extract all the juice out of this retreat. Right, and what occurred was, well, the first week was just physical struggle and black ayahuasca, just lots of purging and vomiting and shitting all around. But the second week was quite intense. And I got some revelations, but I wanted more. And I got some more revelations, and it got quite intense after like ceremony 6 or 7. And I wanted more. And then on ceremony 7, it completely broke me. Like, I asked for more, and I got more, but it was too much. And that's the tricky thing with psychedelics. It's like you never know when you've gone too far, but you got to go to the edge to see, right? It's a delicate balancing act. And it was one of those experiences where I was like, this was too much, it showed me my fear of death. It was absolutely insane. I was like, I'm never gonna touch this stuff ever again. And I had quite a few weeks afterwards where I was still a bit shaky, from that experience. But that in and of itself also showed me the importance of integration. And it showed me also that insight is not integration. Because no matter what I've seen and how deep I went in that retreat, I've seen the truth of it all, I know that God is love, but I couldn't really embody it afterwards. It showed me that insight is not integration. Insight is not integration, even though it can feel that way. And that's key to understand. What's also key to understand is that we want to give relevance to the relative. In psychedelic space, often what I see is an overemphasis on the transcendent, right? We're moving deeper and deeper into consciousness, but further away from our humanness. But when we're not giving relevance to the relative, to the actual day-to-day, and how we're processing these insights, how we're integrating and embodying what we have seen, like what we're actually doing with that in our day-to-day ordinary life as a human, then the insights just fade away, or they're just standing there. They're good for nothing, basically, other than to say like, hey, look at all these cool insights that I've got, So when we're giving relevance to the relative, the real work of integration is beginning. The real work of turning altered states into altered traits is beginning. And it's almost like, I see it almost like we are this vessel, we are this cup. And when we enter psychedelic space, what happens at times is that this divine nectar is poured into us. And we're just receiving it, we're opening ourselves up, and it feels so good. It fills our cup with this divine nectar, with all this insight, with all this processing, with all this healing, But then our cup has holes, many different holes at many different spaces, and that divine nectar slowly sips away. And we're losing it. And then we feel empty again, and we're like, I need another ceremony. I need another high. I need more insight. I need to process more. And we fill our cup again with this divine nectar. But shortly after, through all these holes, the nectar slips away. And we find ourselves empty again. And you see that loop, right? But that is the loop that is not understanding that insight does not equal integration. Because integration and giving relevance to the relative is looking at the cup and saying like, okay, well, how can I, just like close all these holes that are in this cup? So just a little drop of that nectar is going to be contained within the structure that I built for this vessel, for my being, right? So how do we actually do that? How do we move from insight to integration? how do we actually give relevance to the relative so we're not stuck in this loop of endlessly processing our insights and being overwhelmed with all these trophies of insights that we've gained. So I want to make it simple for you today, right? There's more to this process, but for today, I just want to share that we can take one of these insights that we have gathered. We can take one of these realizations, one of these themes of processing that came up in psychedelic space, and we can implement it. That's like looking at one hole and fixing it. Right? We're not trying to fix all the holes at once, but we're looking at one of them that feels like most relevant for us, that feels most precious to us, that we feel most drawn to from our heart, of like, hey, I want to look at that. And then in our daily life, we can do two things to work on that. One is to craft micro commitments, so to extract the insight into action, which means a repeatable behavior that we can do on a regular basis. May that be daily, weekly, monthly, like something that's working on this theme, right? To make it a bit more concrete. As an example, the psychedelic high showed you that, awareness is key and you just want to cultivate self-awareness. So one daily repeatable action might be to observe your breath or to meditate in some other form for about 20 to 40 minutes a day, or 2 times 40 minutes a day. Just ramp it up. If it's important to you, why not implement it? Cut the excuses and turn your insight into micro commitments that you can turn into behavior on a repeatable daily basis. And the second aspect are big action steps. So again, you take one insight and you say, like, what's a key action step that's not related to another psychedelic experience that might help me to integrate that? So, as an example, you might have an idea of what you want to do with your life and where you want to serve because you've received this great vision in the ayahuasca experience. And then you're asking yourself, like, okay, like how can I integrate this? How can I make this vision more clear and integrated? And a big action step might be to go on a vision quest, right? To say, like, okay, I'm going to carve out 3 days or more and I'm going to go into nature, either guided or alone, do it responsibly. But I'm going to be fasting, I'm going to be connecting with the land, I'm just going to be present with nature, and I'm going to look up and I'm just going to be with what is and let this vision emerge from within the core of my being. So it gets integrated a little bit more. And then again, in the dance with micro commitments, you can move towards that. And then you're working on this one hole, and maybe, there's still a hole, but it gets a bit tighter. It gets a bit closer. And you do that for many different things. And I'm sure with all these psychedelic experiences that you already had, you have many, many different ideas on what you can work on. May that be to build an aligned community, to align your environment with what you've seen, to do the shadow work, like the actual shadow work, or study psychology and, work through all that stuff that came up and that you processed in psychedelic space, or to have a regulation ritual that allows you to calm down and to relax and, let your shoulders drop. And all of these things we can do to then move forward. Right? So that's the action on how we can actually turn our insight into integration, how we can turn altered states into altered traits, how we can actually live from what we saw, so that divine nectar that is poured down in the psychedelic experience is not lost as quickly through all these holes that we have in our beautiful vessel. Right? So that's the emphasis, that's the relevance to the relative that we got to move towards, to actually live what we saw. To not fall into the mistake of this endless processing circle jerk of collecting more and more insights, or processing more before we can take action in the world. Taking action in the world is fixing our holes, so the insight that we receive in psychedelic space can actually live and blossom within the heart of our being. If you would like support with that, I do offer 3 one-on-one coaching spots at the time. I'm opening the doors for a very short period of time. If you're curious about working with me one-on-one, so we can build the structure for your insight to blossom, then you can book a call with me via the link in the video description, or send me a message on Instagram and we'll have a chat. Otherwise, you can watch this masterclass about psychedelics. It's a deep one next, and I hope you have a beautiful rest of your day. Whoa, it's cold here. Oh!